The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome once again. I'm Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor, and with me today is Peter Latta, who is the CEO of Silver Wolf Exploration. You're going to meet Peter in just a couple of minutes. Silver Wolf, as we're going to go into the story, is actually a spinout of some projects from Avino Silver Gold Mines Limited. My interview with its CEO, David Wolfen, is coming out about concurrently with this one. And before I get into or start to get into the details myself, before I bring Peter on, just a couple of the usual housekeeping things. Of course, Pete and or myself might be making what are construed as forward-looking statements. So we want to be sure that you understand that. Secondly, here at National Investor Publishing, from time to time, we are compensated by companies that we cover to do media and follow-on work and stuff like that. And so that was something we want you to be aware of as well. Down the road, hopefully not too far, after you watch this video and look at some of the printed information I'll have coming out on both of these companies in the very near future after these videos, do your homework on Silver Wolf. You know, this is down the food chain a bit. This is a grassroots exploration company in one sense, although as you're going to find out from Pete, there's been some exploration work and even some limited mining done in the past on the ground that they have down in Durango State, Mexico. So you've had on the screen here all of their contact information. Be sure that you get in touch with them. And again, for those not on my mailing list, be sure that you reach out to me and get on my mailing list so you have all of the follow-on information, my upcoming specific special issue on precious metals and the profiles on the different companies that are in our orbit. Now, just before I bring Pete on, you know, Avino Silver Gold Mines Limited is a company that's been known to me for an awful lot of years. If I figured it out, probably go back at least 14, 15 years that I've known Avino, and I've known its CEO, David. And one of the times I was down a while back to Durango to see the Avino complex and get a firsthand look along with some of my fellow newsletter writers and analysts, you know, I was struck by the topography that we're going to talk about again, as I did with David the other day. But I also was wondering, you know, what ground around the Avino complex is choice maybe for future exploration. And Avino, more than I understood before I went down there, has quite a lot of land in and around the Avino complex. And a little while later, my question was answered as to what the game plan was, because they spun out Silver Wolf Exploration. They put Peter Latta in charge, who was already at Avino on the staff. He is the CEO of Silver Wolf, and they've got some ambitious plans for the future. So let's start to get some of that now from the horse's mouth rather than the other end, and the person yours truly here. Pete, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. You know, again, Avino to me was always a known quantity. It's a company that has for over half a century now been operating on a small scale, but fairly consistent, more often than not, able to generate bottom line profits with silver, lead, zinc, some copper, a little bit of gold thrown in. And, you know, as David mentioned when he and I spoke the other day, he reminded me that for roughly the first half of Avino's existence, they jointly owned, well, David's late father, Lou, who started Avino, jointly owned the Avino mine and complex with another party down there. and nobody was interested in doing any grassroots exploration or going away from, what was a known quantity. There was plenty to mine on a small scale, and everybody was happy. And even after the Wolfen family and Avino took full control of Avino, that pretty much stayed the situation. There was enough to keep everybody busy there, earn a living for a bunch of the local folks in the company and whatnot. But looking down the road at the likelihood of better days to come for silver, maybe for some base metals as well, they finally did make the decision to spin out Silverwolf. So tell us from your perspective what went into that specific decision-making process a while back.
Yeah, really great question, Chris. Thank you. So, as you mentioned, Avino's been around for 56 years, which is incredible. And a little bit onto that story, prior to NAFTA, you could, as a foreign owner, only own 49% of a Mexican operation. But post NAFTA, David went down and negotiated for the other half of the mine. And with that negotiation, there was some back and forth, but the Mexican landowner put in a bunch of other properties, and that's how they came to be with Avino. But Avino was tied up developing their own properties for the last 20 years, really. And some of these peripheral properties never got to see any development or any exploration dollars. They just sat in the portfolio, paying the claim fees and that sort of thing without anything being done to it. So I'm a technical guy by education. I'm the VP of Technical Services here at Avino. I was looking at these properties and I thought, this would make a lot of sense. We're not getting any value for them currently in Avino's portfolio. This would make sense if they were spun out into its own separate company that was focused on grassroots greenfields exploration. Because I think these properties have a lot of merit and we need to put some dollars into it. So that's exactly what we did, and that's how Silverwolf was born. We changed the name of the company, obviously silver, the target mineral that we're after, and wolf in honor of David's father, Lou Wolfen.
That's neat, and I had forgotten that part of the story until you just reminded me of that. And of course, actually, since we mentioned Lou, I'll bring it up here again. There's a plaque to him at the Avino complex. He's a guy who was a legend up in Western Canada. He started out in the
Very much.
brokerage business. Then he got into more hands-on involvement in the mining industry. A lot of successes for our own members here at the National Investor. He was responsible, and then David afterward, for us making a nice chunk of change with the old Coral Gold in Nevada, which we all remember. And so that's
Absolutely.
neat. Now, Pete, the main project, and as I understand it, there's a couple of different land packages that were spun out in the Silverwolf, but essentially the big one is the Anna Maria project. And I know
That's
that
right.
there has been, as I said a few minutes ago, in the past, some past small scale artisanal mining, just like people did in North America and elsewhere in the world in the old days. You saw a place where mineralization outcrops, and the old timers with pick and shovel, you followed it until it ran out, and then you dug another hole down where you saw some
That's
outcrops.
exactly right.
And so
That's exactly right.
it's a fertile area. And the analogy I used with David more than once, as I've talked and written about Avino in the past, and I'll put this slide up again here as well. When I was first visiting down there, the topography there and these dark, jagged mountains in this, I guess what's called a volcanic cordillera, it was like Godzilla's laying on his stomach.
Right. Yeah,
And you
yeah, yeah.
see all of these things from his back sticking up in the air. This is an area where in the past some massive seismic and volcanic activity happened. And of course, where that happens, chances are that you're going to find some kind of mineralization, often many kinds of mineralization there. So what was the main attraction for the Anna Maria property specifically, Pete,
Yeah,
that
that's
has that at the top of the list?
Yeah, that's critical. And it comes back to those geological features. And not to get too in depth, but the main, the main way minerals deposit in the world is usually you have a hard material penetrating a softer layer. So you have a hard rock penetrating a softer rock, or it can be the other way around from time to time. But basically, you have gaps in there between a hard and a soft material that allow for hydrothermal fluids, hot water that have dissolved minerals, and it comes up and deposits them in a certain orientation in a certain way. And that's essentially how all most or all or I should say most or all mineral deposits are made. And so the main feature here is this one very significant and large intrusive. And an intrusive is very hard rock, and that's kind of the central theme. So you look at that intrusive and you start doing some research on it, and you realize that that geological feature has been responsible for creating a number of mines in the area, and that's well documented. So these are high grade mines, some that were currently in production when we were doing the work, some historical, where there was actually a mining museum currently on premises, so we could go visit that and see kind of the similarities that are on that property. And so that's what led us down the rabbit hole. And then, like I said, there was a lot of technical work on this one particular feature, and we happened to be on the other side of that feature, where the mines are to the north, and we have our property to the south and southeast.
Okay. Now, recently you obtained a permit from the government for the first area that you want to drill. El Soledad is the name of that one?
El Soldado, yeah, that's right.
Soldado, I'm sorry. And that particular target is why?
Yeah, so there's 3 claims over the Anna Maria property. Anna Maria property consists of 3 separate claims. The north, the middle, and the south, and they all have specific names. El Soldado is the southern claim. And so, when we got the property, we walked all 3 of them. We spent a lot of time mapping, a lot of time sampling. And what we came up with was the best option was that southern claim. And that's what's called a carbonate replacement deposit. That's what we're looking for. Those are typically high grade. High grade deposits tend to be good margin. They tend to be very simple metallurgically. So that lends itself to processing. So the idea here, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, is if you have a mine that's within truckable distance of a plant, well, you can reduce your time to cash flow pretty significantly, because you don't have to build a big mill complex, you don't have to permit, and the size of mine that you need then all of a sudden shrinks pretty substantially, as long as you have the grade. So that's a real interesting kind of model for us that we wanted to pursue, because we have the Avino complex just down the road, a couple 100 kilometers. And there's also precedent for the area for that model working quite well with a number of the other mines in the area. So with that in mind, we targeted this CRD system, and we put in a permit a number of months ago, and recently received the permit for drilling. So we are essentially ready to go, which is fantastic for us.
Now, for the uninitiated, and I've always half understood the mechanics of this, but tell us in layman's terms, Pete, what is a carbonate replacement deposit? I mean, just to back up a step quickly, folks, there's one of 2 ways that you're going to recover metals typically in this kind of a setting. And usually in the case of gold, you've got placer, you might have it loose, and you've seen pictures of people and movies of people getting it out of streams and whatnot. But more so, especially these days, you've got to find the right kind of rock, you've got to break it down. And if you've got a high enough grade and the composition metallurgically wise and otherwise of the rock is amenable, you can process it and separate the metals and make money. So as opposed to, say, a porphyry, which some people have heard that term, Pete, that comes up from
Right.
deep underneath the earth. It's like an underground volcano that peters out before it gets to the surface. And then you've got veins and whatnot, offshoots from that. Where does a CRD deposit fit in that characterization?
Yeah, it's kind of like a hub and spoke model, where the hub would be this very hard, intrusive rock penetrating into soft carbonates. And in those soft carbonates, you get these certain cracks that are usually distal to that hub along the spoke, where you have these hot fluids depositing typically silver, lead, and zinc. Whereas a porphyry is typically more copper and gold sort of thing. CRDs are typically more lead, zinc, and silver that's contained in both the lead and the zinc.
And this is where the fluids came and filled in these cracks.
These mantos or chimneys, and sometimes they'll be tubular, sometimes they'll be flat lying, sometimes they'll outcrop on the surface if you're lucky. And that's the fun part is trying to make that discovery of understanding how that fluid exactly flowed.
It's remarkable, and I mean, I as a little kid, I had essentially a third set of grandparents unofficially, some very close family friends. And my first experience with rocks as a little kid was when uh, Uncle Ed and Aunt Eleanor, as we called them, would go out to the Rocky Mountain states and out in the West. They were retired, didn't have two nickels to rub together, but they had to blast their whole life. They traveled on a shoestring, had this old Ford Country Squire station wagon. They'd go, I'm from upstate New York originally. They would go over the western part of the country for the summer and they'd come back. And I thought it was really cool. And they brought me home this cardboard thing that had glued to it several different kinds of rocks. So I see what granite looks like. This is what quartz looks like. This is what
Mm.
this looks like. And it was cool. And it instilled in me an interest in rocks. And over the years, of course, as an adult, I've been to mines all over the place, including down there, and actually had hands-on experience running a couple of them at different times. So it's really been a lot of fun. And in that vein, um, to figure all of this out is remarkable. Now, you said that typically this type of deposit, like what you're targeting, is more silver, and you've got some zinc and lead and so forth. And the zinc and lead with some of the numbers on one of the slides, I'll put it up here on your presentation. There's some pretty good hits on zinc and lead, along with
Yeah,
everything
there's
else.
Yeah, there's some very good grades. So what we did is, we mapped the surface, which takes a long time in these mountains with this type of topography, as you know. And then you find certain things. You find these historical mines, and as you pointed out, in the first part of our conversation there, this was kind of rudimentary mining. As you find a spot and you just chase the vein a little bit. There's no modern exploration done. There's no geophysics. There's no geochemistry. There's no drill rigs. There's just a pickaxe and a shovel, and that did fairly well for a long time. But then the property goes dormant for a number of years, after the revolution, up to 100 years. But the rocks are still there, and no one's looked underneath. So one of the things that attracted me to this property before I get into the sample numbers was the fact that no one's kicked this property around. This hasn't been explored by anyone else. The Mexican landowner that owned it before just had it because there was some small scale mining on and didn't do any modern exploration. Avino didn't do any modern exploration, and then no other company has had it in its portfolio. So it really deserves a good college try to understand what's underneath it. And so you start by doing the mapping, the sampling, the geophysics, the geochemistry, and what comes out of it is that you find these historical adits. Well, there's some pretty fantastic grades in there, and so we need to understand what happens at depth, what happens underneath, and that's where the drill rig and the drill bit becomes the ultimate arbiter of what's there. And the samples just add to the confidence of, hey, this is worth exploring. So you get a sense of how big it is with that, the size of the adit. And then you get a sense of the grades with some grades, 1,300 gram per ton silver, you're getting up to 20% lead. These are fantastic grades. So it's very, very encouraging to see that.
Now, Pete, did you take these samples from a variety of places? Were you able to get down into some of these old adits and tunnels? Were they surface cuts?
Yeah, I mean, so there was a lot of work done. We had 4 geologists at the height of the program doing a lot of sampling, taking about 2,000 samples in various places around the property of areas of interest. And then, we narrow down, okay, this is where we think we should focus our efforts. And, it's not, mining is both more complicated and less complicated than you think, because the old timers were good as far as understanding where things were. And it turns out that the best place to find a new mine is, where an old mine was. So
Always.
that's where you start.
Yeah, or most always, that's true. Are any of these old adits, have you been able to get down very far where they sufficiently strong enough still, or you have to be careful?
I mean, certainly always safety is a priority there, but it wasn't like they were modern drilling and tunneling
Right.
techniques that were applied here. You guys are using picks or hand tools to get in there, so you can get in there pretty deep. But it's more of a cave than it is a modern supported adit, let's say. or drift. And you know, and that's the opportunity though. So, and understanding what happens at depth, or why they stopped where they stopped. You know, it could be for a variety of reasons, and they're usually not documented. But anytime you see that, you realize there's something more here, and they didn't get all of it.
Right. Well, it's got to be tantalizing beyond all belief for you especially to be there and have this right in front of you. As of boy, I can't wait to check this out. So, Pete, as we wind down, what are the? I mean, you want to drill. I'm sure you're going to have
Yeah.
to do a financing here at some point.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a financing. The thing is, with the relationship with Avino, we have very good drill contracts. We own our own drills at Avino, so we can save a lot of money on drilling. And you know, we have a fantastic technical team. The COO of Avino is the VP of Exploration. We have a number of fantastic advisors. A guy by the name of Vic Chevalon, who found the Cordero deposit, 1.3 billion ounces of silver in Chihuahua there. 50 years experience, very experienced man with a great reputation. We got all the right people. Obviously, David's been in the business for a long time and has had a lot of success. So you know, that's first and foremost. You have the right people. You have a property that's not been kicked around. It's got this blue sky CRD potential with the right address, and you know, it doesn't cost that much to test this thing. So it's really, you know, I think things are lining up to make this a really good project.
That'll be great. Well, you know, once news comes out as far as your financing plans and so forth, you know, we'll certainly make sure people know about that. And I think that the upside potential here is remarkable. As you said, you're in the right zip code. And you know, when I had David on the other day, Pete, we were talking about the one drill hole from last summer. That's the deepest one they ever drilled at the Avino complex, started getting more copper. And I mean, this when you understand the implications of that, let alone what you found away from the Avino complex, you realize that even though it was way back in the, I guess, the 16th century, when the Spanish
Right,
were doing some mining down there, that in relative
right.
terms, when you boil it all right down, they got all of the easy stuff, but they made it. They probably didn't get much more than a fraction of what is still laying around everywhere down there. And you know, the challenge today is for guys like you to find it and prove it and exploit it, and you know, then we all have fun.
Yeah, and it's the most exciting part of our business. You know, it's a treasure hunt.
Yeah,
So, and that's exciting because you have all these people that are, and you know, these indications that there's something there, and you just got to keep pursuing it, and yeah, find your buried treasure.
nice. Well, folks, you know, one of my first clients, I'm going back over 40 years, believe it or not, when I got in the financial planning business, or about 40 years, maybe it is, he was an industrialist, and I love the expression he came up with when he was educating me about things like penny stocks and special situations and stuff. He says every serious investor should have at least a certain portion of their portfolio, which is this is your going to the races money. This is your educated guess type money. These are the things that you do. It's not like you throw money blindly at anything, as a lot of people unfortunately do, but something that's early stage, that's speculative. You check as many boxes as you can and say, okay, with this one, and this one, I'll risk a little bit on a flyer, because in this case, you've got a viable half a century plus operating mine right there. And so you know that there's some good stuff in the area. So people could do a lot worse than to have a little exposure to silver wolf exploration. Well, Pete, I appreciate your time today, folks. Do your homework. Here again is the information. Go to the website, contact Pete, you know, ask him your questions. You know, this is something that, especially in the kind of a market that we've had in the recent past for junior exploration companies, it's been pretty slim pickings. We all know it. We've all felt it in various ways. I've seen share prices of a lot of companies that have already got good resources just kind of languish, you know, with very few exceptions. That's going to change. And when it does, I think it's going to change in a big way. But until then, we've got to bide our time, you know, place our bets in those areas, you know, looking down the road. to those better days. And again, I think this is a compelling enough story that you need to take it seriously and do your homework, and make sure again that you keep in touch with yours truly as well. That other end of the horse I mentioned at the beginning with when I brought Pete on. And you know, between the two of us, we'll tell you what you need to know about Silver Wolf. So Pete, thanks much, and I'll look forward to the next time that we can visit in person again.
Thanks so much, Chris. It was a lot of fun.
Take care.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.